Oh, look, we've got the Taraloka people in the shrine room. That's nice. That beautiful shrine. And we got the tech lady in the library, Hriday Gita. Actually, maybe I should just point you lot out because we can see you now. So Hriday Gita's there in the Taraloka library. And is that where the tech's always going to be beamed out from?
Yeah, I'm actually in my room now, but yeah,
okay.
daytime it'll be the library, in the evenings we'll be in our rooms or somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think that's actually very nice for all of us to absorb, because of course in normal times we would actually all be at Taraloka with you, but we have our little human representatives there doing this amazing job of making Taraloka a global phenomenon. That's one of the things about these times, isn't it? It's very difficult, but there's probably many people on this retreat who might not be able to get to Taraloka if you've got childcare, all those kind of things. So it's really wonderful the way Taraloka's opened its heart and its bandwidth to absorb us all. And then the team, are you in which shrine room are you in? Is it the Amitabha shrine room?
They're in the Tara cabin. They're probably struggling to.
Tara cabin. Wow, that is so beautiful. It must be freezing cold, is it?
Got heating in there.
So good. It's cozy. Excellent. Okay, good. And then of course we've got Arijaya at Adhisthana, which is lovely as well. So we've got these places of practice that are supporting us, and we can feel part of that. Okay, enough of that. Every evening we're going to have a little bit of a talk, and then some devotional practice. Tonight I'm going to give a slightly longer presentation to set the retreat up a bit more, going a bit more into Satipatthana and Lojong. And then we're going to do a dedication ceremony and a little bit of chanting. And then the other nights, other members of the team are going to give talks on different members of the Padma family, which would be really lovely. So we're wanting to bring in the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, of course, into the retreat. And as it turns out, this is quite amazing. All of us on the team, we all have our visualization deities, our yidams. They're all from the Padma family. So we're going to have a talk on Amitabha, a talk on Avalokiteshvara, and a talk on Green Tara. And tomorrow night, Arijaya is going to introduce that family and introduce that more, the archetypal element of the retreat. And then we'll have chanting and meditation every other night as well. Good. Okay. So I've got some slides again, because I think it can help to have things to, well, it depends what sort of learner you are. Some people are visual learners, in which case it's helpful to be able to see something. Some people are not visual learners, in which case you just don't have to look, you can just listen. Some people associate PowerPoint with absolutely deadly work meetings. So then you can think it's not a PowerPoint, it's just a whole load of light that's communicating something, and let go of that work association. But yeah, so approach it as you would find helpful, depending on your preferred learning style. So both Satipatthana and Lojong, I would say, are forms of mind training in quite an explicit sense. They're both approaches where we're being given quite good guidance on how to work with this inner world that we have that is often so problematic for us. And I've not taught the two things together before. I think it's quite interesting and exciting to be bringing in approaches from different aspects of Buddhism, but I see them definitely as two doorways into the same experience. So it doesn't need to be a complicated thing. And my hope this week is to keep it fairly simple. So Satipatthana, first of all, this is a text from the Pali Canon, very, very widely practiced in the Buddhist world, seen as by many as the seminal text on mindfulness in the early Buddhist tradition. Very beautiful practice. And Analayo, who's published many books on Satipatthana, but by Wintour. So Wintour's Publications has published many of Analayo's books, which I think is quite a wonderful service to the world. Analayo is a German Buddhist scholar monk, and he's also a very prolific writer, as it turns out. So he's done quite a few different ways of approaching Satipatthana. And he summed the whole text up in these 4 words. So this really does simplify it. If you want to distill all the words of the Satipatthana Sutta into its essential message, the essential message is keep calmly knowing change. So keep implies diligence, it implies continuity of practice. We keep at it. Calmly implies shamatha practice, calm abiding, calming the mind, calming our emotional disturbances, coming into the body. And obviously practicing calm is a big part of Buddhist meditation practice. Knowing is more of the insight practice, of the insight dimension. We really know the nature of experience. And one of the things we know is change, that everything is impermanent. Everything is always changing. And so we can learn to live with a much more fluid and open perspective rather than our usual tight, reactive, closed down perspectives. Well, I shouldn't say our usual. That might be that many of you don't have that as your default setting, but it seems that most human beings, we default to pushing away pain and clinging on to pleasure. And thus the wheel goes round and round and round. And we don't live in harmony with impermanence in the way that we might. So the sutta's got 4 objects of awareness, and we're going to be going into these over the week. There's a whole section on body, how to be mindful of the body. There's a whole section on how to be mindful of feeling tone, which is one way of translating Vedana. It's a very difficult word to translate into English. And it means the very initial arising of a sensation becoming pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So we have a sensation, and it's that very, very initial arising of pleasant or unpleasant or confused. And as we'll see, as the week goes on, awareness of Vedana is absolutely crucial if we are to free our minds. Chitta is mind, but it means mind in quite a specific sense. It's our subjective mind, and we're aware of, is greed, hatred, or delusion present or absent in my mind? Is distraction or contraction present or absent in my mind? Is my mind vast? Is my mind unsurpassable? Is my mind liberated? So you have these different kind of categories of mind, and you just become aware of what's present and what's absent. And awareness is the transformative power in Satipatthana practice. And I'll say much more about this as the week goes on. So we're not necessarily using specific antidotes, we're using awareness, because if you have your faith established and you become aware that you're in a contracted state, it will be quite natural to release around that contracted state. It's very unlikely you're going to think, I'm feeling really contracted, so I know I'm going to make myself more contracted. We don't do that if we have, we have our intention established, which presumably we all have if we're here on this retreat. So awareness itself is enormously powerful, as we'll see over the week. And then there's dhammas, which lots of ways you can translate that, but mental and emotional events seen from the perspective of the Dhamma is one way you can translate that. And the core of that is awareness of the hindrances and awareness of the awakening factors. And again, we'll go into that later in the week. So the way we're going to structure this retreat is every day from tomorrow onwards, we're going to have we'll have a day for each of these categories. So tomorrow, which is Sunday, we'll be doing body. Monday, we'll be doing Vedana. Tuesday, we'll be doing Chitta. Wednesday, we'll be doing Dhammas. And Thursday, we're going to have a practice morning where we'll bring it all together. There's attitudes that are laid out at the beginning of the sutta, what's called the definition verse, which is a kind of call to action in terms of what attitudes you're going to bring to your awareness of these categories that we've just discussed, body, Vedana, Chitta, Dhammas. What are the attitudes you bring to your practice? And we're asked to have appropriate effort, atapi, or diligence. So we maintain our effort, but it's appropriate effort, it's not willful effort. So we're finding a balance between being vague and being forced. And we find this appropriate effort. And you could do a whole retreat just on that. Very, very interesting area, but we'll go into that more as the week goes on. Then there's sampajana, and we can translate that as intelligence and clarity applied to what is coming through the senses, or clearly knowing. So we've got stuff coming through the senses all the time. You know, our sense doors are receptors of a continual flow of stimuli. All our senses are just receiving information all the time. And often we're not very intelligent or clear about A, what we're experiencing, and B, what to do about it. So sampajana is a kind of wise, clear knowing. This is what's happening, and I'm clear about this is what I'm clear about that, and I'm intelligent about how I might respond. Then there's knowing right now, or being mindful, and this is sati. Again, this is a very well-known word for mindfulness. Often mindfulness is just seen as sati, but as we're seeing in the sutta, it's a much more multi-dimensional quality. Mindfulness includes all these things, but the present moment awareness aspect is sati. And it's interesting that this word sati is related to a Pali term sarati, which means to remember. And you can understand that to be that we are remembering to be present. We're remembering the thing that we very often forget, which is to be present, because our minds are just swept away into the past and the future. And then there's this Vinaya Abhija Domanassa, which is Analia calls free from desires and discontent in regard to the world. And Subhuti translates as letting go of being slave to likes and dislikes, which I think is very good. I can really relate to that. So letting go of being enslaved by likes and dislikes. And that really is the heart of the matter in Buddhist practice, because we have impressions coming in through the senses, and before we know it, we're turning away from things we don't like, and we're pulling things we do like towards us. So we really are enslaved by these impulses of I like this and I don't like that. But of course, it's usually unaware, and that really keeps us trapped on the wheel, just going round and round and round and round. We think that things that we like will last forever, and then we're disappointed when they fade. Things that we don't like, we also think will last forever. So we have this kind of twin madness where we want things to last forever and we hold on to them, please last forever. And then of course they fade and we're disappointed. And then when things are unpleasant, we think, oh no, it's going to last forever. And we torture ourselves. And of course it won't last forever, because that too is impermanent. So those are the attitudes. And then this is quite beautiful. I really love this sutta. I've done a lot of study on this sutta. It's become one of my sort of key texts. And I like its dramatic structure because it has a chorus or a refrain that keeps on coming in like a drum beat. So first of all, you have the attitudes, you have the definition verse, you know, be diligent, clearly knowing, mindful, letting go of being slave of likes and dislikes. And now be aware of your body. And then this verse comes in. This is how we can bring our body awareness. I'll tell you what it is in a minute, and then you'll come back to it. And now be aware of your Vedana. And then this verse comes in, telling you how to be aware of your Vedana. And then now be aware of your Chitta. And then this verse comes in. So it's got this beautiful narrative structure of this chorus or this refrain that's like a drum beat rousing us to insight. So we are asked to be aware of those different objects of awareness, body, Vedana, Chitta, and Dhammas, internally, externally, and internally and externally. And the scholars generally interpret that to mean self and other. So this is actually the only time in the sutta that's explicitly referencing other. So it's actually a very, very important element. So you're aware of your own body and you're aware that other people have bodies. You're aware of your own Vedana, you're aware that other people have Vedana. And you're aware of the interconnected nature of all beings by implication. We're aware of the arising, the passing away, and both the arising and the passing away of your body, of your Vedana, of your Chitta, of your Dhammas. So clearly this is impermanence. It's the three lakshanas, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness when we don't live in harmony with this. And then insubstantiality, that this arising and passing away also applies to our sense of self. That even our sense of self is impermanent, insubstantial. So we're getting into insight territory here. And we are mindful enough for bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness. That's the point of our mindfulness practice. So this is encouraging us not to get caught up with experience. So we're not being taught how to be mindful so we can be really excellent internet shoppers. Or very often in the secular mindfulness field, one of the things that people ask is a sniper mindful? You know, somebody who's trained as a killer, are they mindful? Well, actually, people ask that in lots of contexts. And from a sort of bare awareness point of view, they are very aware. A sniper has to be incredibly aware of their body, of their breathing, of the target, of the wind, of light, very sort of hyper aware. So there's tons of awareness, but they're not mindful in the Buddhist sense because their mindfulness is not for bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness. Their mindfulness is to kill and take life. So that's a completely different thing. So this is where Buddhist mindfulness is always in the service of bare knowledge. So we can really know our experience. And we use mindfulness in order not to get caught up with things, rather than to be better at getting caught up with things. Very, very important point. And then the last one is related. We abide independently, not clinging to anything in the world. So mindfulness is cultivated simply for the sake of gaining enlightenment. And these are progressive, these verses in the refrain. And so this is the highest level where our mindfulness enables us to abide independently of getting caught up with experience, and we are not clinging to anything anymore. There's no clinging and there's no aversion. So this is a state of complete freedom. And the Satipatthana is considered the direct path to enlightenment. And as you can see from this incredibly brief little overview, it's very comprehensive. It's very thorough. It's incredibly accessible, very approachable, and it's brilliant. As I say, I've done a lot of study and practice on this, and the more I go into this text, the more marvelous I think it is. And it's got a glorious simplicity as well. You know, it really is being present, knowing what's happening, being intelligent, being clear, and applying our sort of ethical values to our experience and moving to open states rather than contracted states. I think that really is what it is in a nutshell, moving from closed down states to open states that are aligned with the true nature of things. And if you practice this sutta, it will help you in that direction. So as I say, we're going to be going into this every day. In the mornings, we've got a couple of hours. So the first hour will be Satipatthana on each of those domains. And then the second hour, we'll be looking more at the Mahayana Lojong approach to mind training, but still using those domains of body, Vedana, Chitta, and Dhammas. So I'll move on to that now. What am I doing for time? So this is a beautiful picture of Atisha, great Buddhist teacher who lived around the 11th century. Notes. Beautiful picture, beautiful. And he took these teachings to Tibet. And there's quite a lot of interesting stories about that. Maybe I'll just touch on it very briefly. So he was a Bengali scholar and practitioner, very great practitioner already. He was the abbot of a huge monastic university in India. And then he wanted to study the Mahayana more, and he went to Sumatra, which is now Indonesia, and studied under a teacher called Dharmakirti for 12 years. And that would have been a difficult trip in those days. So he was incredibly dedicated. And he went to Indonesia, came back to India, brought some of the Mahayana teachings back. And then he was invited to go to Tibet because Buddhism was not thriving in Tibet at that time. He was already in his 50s and he said, no, I'm too old. I can't go to Tibet. And then this king asked him again. And then the king was captured by bandits. And there was a huge ransom for his release. And the ransom was that his followers needed to raise his body weight in gold. They needed to find his body weight in gold. And the king's nephew was managing that particular task, which would have been very, very difficult. And eventually he got the king's body weight, but not the head. So he didn't manage still to get the complete weight, just his body weight. And the bandits were saying, well, no, we're not going to release you. We need the whole lot. We need the head as well. And then there's this beautiful quote from the king to his nephew. He said, my dear nephew, I am pleased that you understand the evils of violence, but now you must forget about me. Instead, use all the gold you have collected to invite to Tibet the great master, Atisha. I am now old, and even if I am not killed by this evil king, I would only live for another 10 years. It will shame me if so much gold was given to this evil king just for this. I have died countless times in previous lives, but not once have I died for the Dharma. Now I am very happy to do so. Take all the gold to Atisha in India and do all you can to invite him back to Tibet. Please tell Atisha that I have given my life for the welfare of my subjects and the Dharma so that he could be brought to Tibet. Although I have not had the fortune to meet him this lifetime, I pray that I will meet him in future lives. So that's quite amazing, isn't it? And of course, Atisha couldn't really say no to that. And so even though he was quite old himself, and again, a perilous journey from India up into Tibet, he did go. And his main deity was Green Tara. And Green Tara said to him that if you go to Tibet, it's going to shorten your life, but you're going to benefit many, many people. So Atisha went to Tibet knowing it was going to shorten his life, but doing so in the service of the Dharma. He went there and he had a huge impact on Buddhism in Tibet. Apparently when he got there was a lot of people practicing magic. They thought that the main practice was to be able to walk through walls and fly and do all these kind of things. And he thought, let's get back to basics. He thought it was really important to help the Tibetans really understand the Dharma rather than it being about magic. Got back to basics, and he taught going for refuge to the three jewels and bodhicitta, arousing bodhicitta, gaining enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And it was the arousing bodhicitta teachings, that was the main teachings he got from Dharmakirti in Indonesia, as far as I'm aware. So going for refuge and genuine compassionate motivation, those were the things that he taught repeatedly. And they've become hugely influential in Tibetan Buddhism, and all the great schools have done commentaries on Atisha's texts. So Lojong is mind training, his sort of mind training, and it's take everything, especially difficulties, onto the path. And that includes circumstances and it includes other people. So there's another funny story about Atisha, that he had a tea boy. I think the masters probably had these people that, like servants, I suppose, that would serve him his tea. And this tea boy was incredibly annoying. And he took his tea boy with him to Tibet because he wanted that practice. He didn't want to be complacent. He wanted to make sure that he had aggravations in his life to keep on working on his mind. So it's, again, as I was saying this morning, I think it's very timely for these times, this bringing adverse conditions onto the path. Don't turn away from anything. And, you know, probably relevant to any time in human history, but the times that we're going through seems very, very relevant to me. It's based on the view of absolute bodhicitta, which is the clear blue sky of awareness. So just look at that blue sky for a minute. And your mind is like that. And my mind is like that. And our minds are not ultimately isolated from one another. So this is the nature of reality, of the truth, is vast and boundless, like a clear blue sky. So all these teachings of taking adversity onto the path and so on, it's based on this view. Otherwise, of course, we just get overwhelmed. So the view is very, very important that, yes, we have our subjective mind, but also we have awareness itself, if you like, always available to us, which is boundless. I always like to think of it as being boundless, luminous, and radiant. And I find it very helpful in my daily life to remind myself when things get a bit tight to rest back in luminous, boundless, radiant awareness. And I can get a taste of that. And then the practice is what's called relative bodhicitta, which is compassion. You know, how do we then apply our teaching to the nitty-gritty of everyday life, which includes 7 billion other human beings crowding the planet? So relative bodhicitta is the same as compassion. And his teaching would give the view of absolute bodhicitta and then a lot of detail about how to cultivate compassion through exchanging self and other, through, like he had his tea boy, you know, he had this annoying character in his life. He saw that as a fantastic practice because you see where your limitations are. You see where your edges are when you've got difficulties, and then you can work with those to free up your mind so you can rest more easily in radiant awareness. The complete instruction in a single sentence: whatever you want, others all want as much, so act on that. Yeah, if you don't remember anything else that I say all week, this is a good thing to remember. Whatever you want, others all want as much, so act on that. Another way of thinking of that is, whatever you experience, think of others. So whatever you're experiencing in any given moment, there will be someone else in the world having a very, very similar experience at that moment. There are probably thousands, millions of people having a similar experience. So whatever you experience, you always turn outwards. Use that as your point of connection with other people. cultivate compassion, and that also unwinds our tendency to circle back to self all the time. So whatever you want, others want, all want as much, so act on that. So we overcome suffering using the mind training by unwinding the structure of the ego. That's really what you're doing with these practices. And we do that through thinking of others as an antidote to preferencing self over other. And we can, discuss this more as the week goes on. You might think that you don't do that. But when we really look deeply, even if we've got very low self-esteem, very low self-view, there's still going to be the preferencing of, it's very kind of basic, that I am the center of the universe. That's the attitude that most of us have. We're either better than or worse than other people, but it's still a self-referential or a self-preferential attitude. So the mind training, you definitely do use antidotes. So you think of others as a way of unwinding that. And then, as I've already said, taking adversity onto the path as an antidote to turning away from suffering. Because you could say that two of the primary ways that keep us trapped on the wheel and keep us suffering is a tendency to pull everything into me and to be oriented from a strong sense of self-importance. And the other one is that we just flinch away from suffering. That's what we do. We just turn away. We turn away. I don't want that. I don't want that. And as soon as we do that, we're setting up a wall in our heart and a wall in our mind. So the mind training is like, okay, let's have a look. Let's include the suffering on the path. Now, there's so many ways this can be misunderstood. I'm painfully aware of this as I'm talking. And I will unpack it much more as the week goes by. But of course, so this idea of this language of self, we do have a self. This is very, very important. Of course, we have a self. I'm sitting here, you're out there. And we do have an identity as beings. Of course we do. But the error is when we then concretize that into something that's enduring. That's the error that we make. And we concretize it into something that's discrete and separate. That's the error of perception. So we're not being told to ignore this psychophysical organism. We need to love that. We need to care for that, have metta for that. But we're being invited to unwind that extra layer that we add to that of permanence and fixity and agency. Well, we do have agency, but enduring identity. That's the error of perception that we make. But we do clearly need to love ourselves and care for ourselves. Of course we do. And that's why we have the first stage of the metta bhavana is the self, is ourselves. So we can build up that resource within ourselves. And Bante's been really good on all this idea that we need to be a happy, healthy human. That's a big part of our training. And we don't try to exterminate ourselves through misunderstanding the non-self teachings. We do have a conventional self, an empirical self, a functioning self. We just don't have an enduring, fixed entity. There's nothing in me that is unchanging. Everything is changing. And again, taking adversity onto the path, of course, that can be incredibly misunderstood, that we have to just have a horrible life, focusing on suffering all the time. And it's important to remember that these are methods. It's not a metaphysical position. It's a method. Because we're doing this all the time, one way to deal with that is to do this. Yeah, rather than doing this, we do this. And it's practical. So these teachings are highly practical and highly pragmatic. And they really, really work. Yeah, so as I said, there's lots of ways it can be misunderstood, but I'll go into it more as the week goes on and try to identify ways it can be misunderstood, but also the point to the amazing joy that can arise when we stop living in this kind of pushing the pain away and pulling pleasure towards us and trying to hang on for dear life to something that's not going to change when everything's changing, and learning how to release and let go and release and let go, and then having real joy from opening our hearts to others. It's a much more pleasant way to live. It's a much more pleasant way to live, to look out into the world and connect and feel the connection than to be closed in. And what comes out of Lojong training is incredible joy. So we'll hopefully have a little taste of that this week as well. Good. So that's just a kind of setting the scene. And as I say, I'll go into different dimensions of it as the week goes by. So the first hour each morning will be on presence, building up mindfulness of body or Vedana or Chitta. And then the second hour will be how can we use that as a point of connection, a point of empathy with others, and deeply, deeply feel into the fact that millions of people are having the same experience as us right now. And how can we use that as a point of connection and to unwind that tendency to be closed in. So we're moving from being closed in to opening out. And then we're going to have these lovely talks in the evening and devotion to give us a different flavour, which I think will be really lovely. So I'm going to hand over now. Oh, let me stop this share. So again, I'll share this. I'll put this PowerPoint on the Padlet thing so you can refer back to it later if you'd like to. Over to the Tara Loka team.